Let's chill out with a little art meditation. Now, for today's mosaic, instead of doodling at the end with intentional doodles or zentangle patterns, if you're familiar with that phrase, they're more intentional, aesthetically pleasing doodles. Today, inspired by a comment I got recently, someone said something along the lines of, "Your doodles are so pretty. I wish mine looked like that." Something like that. Today, we are going to scribble our end result. Truly scribble. I'll be using a loose grip at the end. And I know I'm getting way ahead of myself. So let me back up. You just saw me pencil in the lines. Now I'm using Sharpie paint pens to color in the shapes. And don't worry about skill or technique. I mean, I'm staying in the lines for this part, but you just want to get the color on the paper. And I'm using watercolor paper. It's just a personal preference when I do these art meditations. I like how it feels. I like the sound of the paint pens against the watercolor paper. This is obviously sped up, this part. In total, this piece took me about 25 minutes. So this was about 10 to 12 minutes of coloring in the shapes here. This part of the process helps me ground myself, become more present. So I'm just going to trace all those lines with a black paint pen. And if you miss any sections or your black line isn't perfectly aligned with your pencil line, no big deal. You can go back and kind of color in those shapes. That's why I like paint pens, because they're more opaque. You can cover up some of your quote mistakes, but with art meditation, I always say don't get too caught up with how this thing looks as you're going. I like to just be mindful and, like right here, kind of just cover any areas that need covering as I go. So it's no big deal. You can always fix stuff or do another one later. And I'm just going to touch up some of the black line there. All right, so I'm emphasizing the really loose grip now with the Sharpie. Gonna make my scribbles. So instead of intentional, aesthetically pleasing zentangle patterns or doodles, with a loose grip, I'm going to make marks on the page. And I guess technically this isn't scribbling, these are straight lines, but with a loose grip. So if you have shaky hands, if it's hard for you to make really fine details just for whatever reason, this is a great exercise. But I'm actually not trying to make these lines straight. It's more about the movement, and I am one with the marker. But seriously, just letting myself be the process itself is the best way to explain how this feels in this moment. So just very, very loose grip here. It's okay if the lines are shaky. In fact, in the end, it looks better with this particular technique and approach when the lines are not perfect. And for this, I'm doing the same pattern in the same color, or let me say that differently. Each color has a specific pattern. So all the pink got the lines. Now I'm going to move into this light blue or this teal and do some scribble circles. So again, loose grip. We're not looking for perfection. There will be some cohesiveness, and in the end, this does turn out to be aesthetically pleasing, at least for me. But that's not the point here. I'm not trying to replicate a specific Zen tangle pattern. just throwing some scribble circles on the paper. And I think we can fit one more right in this little guy right there. All right, now I'm going to do some scribble swirls or loop-de-loos. Again, loose grip. This is not how I would be holding the marker if I was doing more fine detail work or intentional pattern making. Another way you could do this is to use your non-dominant hand. I'll have to do a video with that sometime where, I'm right-handed. So even though I'm using a loose grip and scribbling here, I am right-handed, so I still have more control. It'd be fun to try this with the non-dominant hand, so I should do a left-handed video from start to finish with the pencil, the coloring in, the tracing in black. Now I'm moving on to some stippling or the dot making with the marker. It's kind of hard to see in the video. I am going to go over all of these with a white marker as well. But also just enjoy the sensory experience here too. The sounds that each different kind of mark makes and the sensation on the actual paper. Okay, here we are with the white paint pen going back in and adding details in white, and I'm going to do that for all the shapes here. Going to add some white lines onto my pink shapes, keeping that grip loose. You can see the unsteadiness of my hand because of the loose grip more easily with the white paint pen than you could with the black Sharpie. Probably because it's a softer tip, so it's flowing more on the paper, if that makes sense. There's less friction, so it's moving more on the paper. And for me, I just really love how this feels. Okay, now I'm using a white gel pen. So I'm going to do the scribbles left on the teal and the purple shapes using this gel pen. Just tracing over without trying to follow the lines exactly, just getting the essence of the shape down in white. Gives it a little pop, a little dimension, and a few extra minutes of relaxation and satisfaction. There's something really freeing about doing this with scribbles and being less focused on the specific zentangle pattern. And then last but not least, let's do our purple shapes. By the way, use whatever colors you have, whatever colors you want. You could do a mosaic with a lot more colors. I've done some with 12 colors before, and the shapes can be smaller, they can be bigger. You can use a small piece of paper, a much larger piece of paper. So I wanted to have something in less than 30 minutes total, which is why I went with this particular size paper. I actually cut it down. I don't know the exact dimensions. I could measure it for you, but I haven't. I cut this down from a larger piece of watercolor paper, and then I'll use those small pieces for other projects that were left over. Anyway, now I'm just cleaning up some of the black lines. This is optional. For me, this sort of brings a sense of completeness, like putting a cap on the practice. You could leave it unfinished. You could leave it open if you kind of like that scribble effect over the whole paper. But touching up here just feels good. That's it. There's something really soothing about going and cleaning up some of these lines. And I like the juxtaposition of there's some clean, crisp edges here, some clean lines, but then there's the scribble marks in the shapes themselves. So it was a nice balance of the two. Okay, let's peel this tape off. I've said this before. Peeling the tape off and kind of doing the reveal, but the actual sensation of removing the tape and seeing those crisp edges underneath is always my favorite part. Always. Okay, and there we have it. And just to kind of show you, here's a mosaic I did with more intentional doodles, actual zentangle patterns, you could call it. I love this. I love the scribble, the loose grip, the results here. So it felt good, and I think it looks really cute too. Thanks for watching.